Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's press conference. I'm Sergeant Tess Detterding, Public Information Officer for the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office. 40 years ago today, on April 24th, 1980, Robin Brooks left her normal shift at donut time on Kiefer Boulevard just after midnight. Later that day, a friend of Robin's arrived at her apartment for a scheduled swim date, but she did not receive any response at the door. She and other friends were unable to make contact with Robin throughout the day. At 4 p.m., when Robin failed to show up for her scheduled work shift, her friend forced her way into Robin's apartment and found Robin deceased in her bedroom. Robin had been sexually assaulted and stabbed multiple times. Robin was 20 years old at the time of her vicious murder. Yesterday, on April 23rd, 2020, Philip Lee Wilson was arrested in his North Sacramento home for the murder of Robin Brooks. He has been booked into the Sacramento County Main Jail. Before we hear from Sheriff Jones and District Attorney Schubert, I would like to inform you that in an effort to protect the integrity of the investigation and future prosecution, we cannot take questions specific to the investigation at this time. However, we are honored and excited to talk about the dedication of our Sacramento law enforcement family in bringing justice to victims and their families, not only in Robin's case, but all cases that are tirelessly pursued by detectives and the prosecution team for years, and sometimes, as in Robin's case, for decades. At this time, I would like to introduce to you Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here, for listening to the facts surrounding this relentless pursuit for justice, in this case 40 years in the making. I know over the last several years there is no shortage of discussion and advocacy on behalf of those that are incarcerated, inmates, those that are accused, and criminals. But what is often much more difficult to find are discussions about the victims. While we have all been locked down, even during this time, I've been forced by the courts to release over 1,000 inmates. And those folks that are getting arrested, most of them are being faced with zero bail and are going right out the front door. So it's easy to get lost and forget about the victims. But I want to tell you that both the district attorney, myself, and all law enforcement, we never forget about the victims. In fact, in many respects, that's all we think about, are victims. Sometimes these cases take a little bit longer to solve than others, but none of them are forgotten. None of them are put on the shelf forever. And this, although is the latest case, I can promise you will not be the last. With that, I'd like to introduce our District Attorney, Anne Marie Schubert.
Thank you, Sheriff. It is fitting that today culminates National Crime Victims' Rights Week. This year's theme happens to be Seek Justice, Ensure Victims' Rights, and Inspire Hope. And when we talk about hope, human rights activist Desmond Tutu once said, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." For anyone who has worked on or who is passionate about cold cases, there are certain things that you quickly learn about them, especially when it's ones that involve the rape and murder of women and children. They are cases that can scar the soul. For police and prosecutors, criminalists, and even those who have long since retired since the crime was investigated, they can at times haunt you. Many of these cases can in fact haunt entire communities. They can consume you. They can invade your thoughts. The depravity of these crimes often become forever embedded in your memories. They can make you question your work. Was there something that was missed? Is there more that we can do? And if you were to ask some of our most well-known and respected retired homicide investigators, like Carol Daly from the Sheriff's Department or Pete Willover from the police department would probably tell you the same thing. These are cases that even challenge your hope. Hope that someday it may be solved, someday that you can bring justice for those families. And then you take that and you now imagine for a moment and ask yourself, what does that cold case, rape, murder, do to that family member, those family members of that victim? Day after day, year after year, and in some cases, decade after decade. Undoubtedly, they haunt them. They also consume their lives. They invade not just their thoughts, but their hearts and their souls as well. For those family members in those days, and weeks, and years, and decades after that murder, they somehow have to manage to get up every morning, live another day, and know that their world is different than it was before. Someone once said it's a world that, quote, no longer has the same color and light and joy that it did before. And all the while, they just want hope. Remember, hope is being able to see the light despite the darkness. Hope tends to play tricks on your minds. You hope for answers, you hope for justice. Yesterday, I watched a 2017 news story done on Robin's murder by a local TV station. The story featured Sergeant Links, retired homicide sergeant here, as well as Robin's sister Maria. The story was done 37 years after her murder. 37 years later. And when I watched it, there were some things that were quite evident. You could see things in their eyes. You could hear things in their voices. You could see and hear the passion and persistence of law enforcement, in particular Sergeant Links, and the dedicated people from the Sheriff's Department. She's probably not going to tell you this, but she volunteered for years on this case long after she retired. She's probably not going to tell you that that's not an uncommon trait for law enforcement, the commitment to seeking justice even long after they've retired. And then I watched Maria's interview. You couldn't just see and hear how she felt. You could feel it. Quite honestly, when I watched that interview, you could see the tears were seeping from her heart. In her own words, her sister's murder had consumed her life. But so too had hope. Hope had consumed her life. For Maria, that hope gave her that light that she needed, that someday her killer's name and face would be identified and she might someday get justice. That hope, in my opinion, came from the greatest tool ever given to law enforcement, DNA. And that first ray of hope came in 2004 when forensic DNA evidence was developed 25 years after the crime had been committed. That ray of hope came when our crime lab was able to develop a DNA profile from the person that left DNA behind in the rape murder of Robin Brooks. I can't go unsaid. Much credit goes to our crime lab for their persistence over the last 16 years. And over the years, we must all acknowledge that DNA and its ability to not only solve crime, but to identify the guilty and exonerate or eliminate those who are not, has not only evolved, but advanced really in a revolutionary way. Convicted offender DNA databases, familial search DNA databases, genetic phenotyping so that we might now know what the person might look like to help us lead us to the individual. And then came this revolutionary new tool called investigative genetic genealogy that coincidentally became known to us exactly 2 years ago today with the arrest of Joseph DeAngelo. And with this new tool and some incredible work done by some folks in my office, Lieutenant Kirk Campbell, Investigative Assistant Monica Zykowski, side by side with Sergeant Links, oftentimes I know, because I would get the calls or the texts, late at night, after hours, and on weekends, all for the same mission in mind, to put a name and a face to the person that did this. This new tool, as I've said before, is the perfect marriage between science and dedicated police work. With these two working together, science and really extraordinary police work in this case, Philip Wilson now stands charged in a felony complaint in Sacramento County with the rape murder of Robin Brooks. For Maria and the rest of her family, on this day, the 40th anniversary of her murder, I hope that today that your world has a little more color and a little more light than it did before. And with that, I'll introduce Sergeant Links.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming today, this very significant day. There's not a lot I can add to what after Deputy District Attorney Anne-Marie Schubert has said. I've been involved in this investigation for 16 years. I have either been involved specifically in the investigation or supervised the detectives that were involved. All of these cases are very personal to me, this one specifically because I've worked so hard on it and for so long. I want to thank Sheriff Jones and District Attorney Schubert for all the support and assistance that they've given us to work on these cases. We have a lot of unsolved cases that go back many years. And we're working them as fast as we can and as much as we can. And it's for the families. Everything that we're doing now is for these families to get some type of justice for their victims that have been taken away from them. In this case, Robin's sister Maria and I have been in contact for many years. And both of us are very determined to not give up hope, to have faith that these will be solved. And every year we continue that, and it's happening. It's happening now. So many of these cases. I mean, we had one yesterday. Now we're having one today. To all those victims out there, their families that are waiting for theirs, we're working, we're trying very hard. Keep the faith, keep the hope that we will try to solve these cases. I've dreamed of this day to actually be able to stand up here and say we have arrested the man responsible for this crime. One of the best things I could ever do is FaceTime with Maria yesterday and tell her that we caught Philip Wilson and that he is responsible without a doubt for the murder and rape of her sister Robin. Maria, in speaking to her, wanted to talk with you. Of course, she couldn't be here. So Maria has sent us a video to tell us how she feels about what's happened today. So I think we'll play that now.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this press conference today. I want to take this moment to say that this arrest could not have happened at or occurred at a more appropriate time than National Victims Week. This arrest hopefully will give hope to all the families of other victims of unsolved crime and solved. Just as appropriately, today marks 40 years since we lost our sweet Robin. Every year, the memory of our loss surfaces again and again. So today is a bittersweet as it's 40th anniversary of her death. Our family would like to take this opportunity to thank Detective Nikki Link, who has worked this case tirelessly. Her efforts have been amazing. With the entire Sacramento Sheriff's Department and everybody at Parabon Lab, the media, and all other efforts which led to this arrest. Thank you. I know Robin is smiling and saying, job well done. May she finally rest in peace. Robin's death was a devastating loss to our family, a heartbreaking pain of which we have never recovered. The senselessness of this crime, and it was horrible, And what was done to our lovely, compassionate, sweet Robin defied all explanation. She had her whole life in front of her, and in one horrific night, it was taken from her. The pain still continued. We hope this will bring our family some closure. However, she is still missed immensely.
On behalf of the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office and the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office, we'd like to thank you for watching and attending today. That will be the conclusion of our press conference. The DA and Sheriff may be available for further comment outside upon request. Thank you.